Hi again, everybody. Welcome into an all-new edition of No Holding Back. Ben Holden with you. To my left, as always, Fred Pledge. Freddie, how are you?
We're ready to go. Bronco edition today.
Yep. Talking some more puck. Pat Ferschweiler, bottom of our screen, associate head coach of Western Michigan. Pat, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Great, guys. Good to see you.
You too, man. What's been the biggest challenge or uniqueness of all this that we've all been in now for 2+ months for you, my friend?
Well, just the lack of sports and the lack of hockey, is an interesting time in my life. I can't ever remember that. Thank God for The Last Dance, and it's pumped a little energy into our veins and remembered the competitive spirit. And the best part about it is we get lots of time. I have 16 and 14-year-old daughters and a great wife, so getting to spend lots of time with them is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great. There are some blessings in disguise through all that. That's certainly one. I can relate, and I know Fred can too in that regard. So for you guys this season, man, I really felt you guys had as good a shot as anybody coming down the stretch to win the whole thing in the NCHC. What were your takeaways from the season that you guys had?
Just incredibly disappointed about the lost opportunity, especially for our seniors. We had a tremendous class, great kids. Hugh McGing, our captain, is an All-American. Wade Allison, a bunch of elite players and elite kids. And I loved our hockey team. I think the first half, we not only had injuries, but we had lots of injuries to our best players. And so we found, which gave other guys lots of opportunity to have access to ice time they normally wouldn't have. And so we put the whole puzzle back together. We had lots of guys playing at a real high level. And I think in the second half of the season, we only lost a couple games, and, they were tight ones. And I thought we were playing some of our best hockey. I don't think lots of people would want to face us in the playoffs.
No, not the way you guys play, man. I love the way you guys play. Hard, physical, skilled. You got it all, man. So we'll get back to that a little bit as we go along here. But I'm going to turn it over to Fred. We talked offline. We kind of like to go through your career. So
Sure.
We'll throw a few things at you, and I'll let Freddie start us off with that part of it. Freddie.
Yeah, part of this first is just going through everyone's roots and your start in Minnesota. And I know you played in the USHL in Rochester when the USHL was really rising to prominence as a developmental league for college players. But take us a step back before that, your youth hockey days, high school days. Where did you learn the game and who from?
Well, Minnesota, I always say is still the last pure hockey place in the country, and that's even changing a little bit. But when you're in Minnesota, you play for your city team, and everyone does, and you play and you try out, and what that ends up is you play with the same group of kids for a lot of years in a row, and I would say it was a fantastic experience for me, youth hockey growing up. Lots of those guys were the guys that were in my wedding. They're still, the families become best friends. Those groups of parents are still my parents' best friends, and so it's real community based. It's real family based in Minnesota. It's not torn apart by from this. You don't go from this organization to the other organization to the other organization chasing coaches. Most of the coaches were parents. They had varying degrees of experience hockey wise, but they all cared. They all did a great job, and it was just a community of hockey, and it truly is the state of hockey for that reason. The rinks are community owned, so they're not necessarily profit based. Lots of them, even in my hometown, there's a loss built in, so the ice time's cheaper, it's more accessible. Lots of outdoor rinks. So there's lots of places to play hockey. I mean, you're growing up in Minnesota, especially then, and still, I think to some degree now, it's everyone I knew played hockey at some point, and then we'd all just quit at different times of our life, or we're out of the game at different times. So it was a great experience. And then high school hockey in Minnesota it's a big deal, and you can make it to the state tournament there. You're on TV. There's 20,000 people in the stands. It sells out. And I'll tell you, from the time I was in kindergarten on, the high school tournament started on Thursday morning. 11 o'clock is the first game. And back then, they had to wheel the TVs into the classrooms, but elementary schools, junior highs, senior highs, that Thursday and Friday of class is just watch the state hockey tournament in every classroom across the state of Minnesota. So it's a pure place to grow up and play hockey, and it truly fosters the love of the game. So it was pretty great.
So give us your recruiting story. Every young Minnesotan, I'm sure, in the late 80s, early 90s, wants to be a Gopher, maybe a Bulldog, maybe go to North Dakota. How do you wind up in Kalamazoo playing for Bill Wilkinson?
Well, it's funny. My recruiting story is a little different than others. So Duluth actually recruited me out of high school. I was back then, a little skinny kid, 5'11", about $155 when I graduated high school. And so I went to Duluth. They told me they were going to redshirt me. I was on a half ride academically, so I thought, hey, that sounds like a great plan. I'm not ready for college hockey. And I even said to them at the point, I said, I got junior hockey right here in my hometown in USHL in Rochester, and I'll play here. And again, back then, it wasn't extremely popular to play junior hockey like it is now. Like everybody wants to play junior hockey now, and it's a necessary stepping stone for most people. But so I went up to Duluth, and we kind of got to the end of the first quarter up there, where it's mainly just captain's practice. And, we worked our way into the few coaches' practices, and they called me in one day, and they said, we're going to cut you. I said, well, how are you cut? I'm not even trying out. I'm going to be redshirted. I was naive. I didn't really know what, and I said, well, I told you guys I wasn't ready to be here. And so they said, well, we'd like you to go back, play junior hockey, and then come back here at some point. I said, well, okay. So, and I called my parents, and first thing my mom says, no, you stay in school. They're so worried about, that I wasn't going to go back or something. I was a good student, mostly A student. And so I knew I was going to be, but I wanted to be a Division I hockey player. So I came back. I played, lucky enough to have that in my hometown, like I said, for the Rochester Mustangs. Played a year and a half in the USHL. In 2 years, by the time then I was a decent player and was ready mentally for sure, and certainly more ready physically. By that time, I'd grown. I was 6'2" by that time, so I'd grown 3 inches after high school. I came into Western Michigan just a shade under 200 pounds, so I had certainly put on some size that way. And I think I was ready for success in college hockey. And, I look back and people said, it could be a disappointing point in my life, or I thought it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because Duluth cutting me made me choose, did I really love the game? Did I want to be a Division I hockey player? I could have just stayed at school easily, taken my half ride academically, and went about my way. But it really made me recognize and foster that love of the game and say, okay, I got to dig in. I'm not good enough, And so it's the first time in Minnesota that I was told I wasn't good enough hockey player. So I had to realize those guys were right, and I had to work harder, and I had to get after it. So it was a great lesson. And when I came here to Western, I had an unbelievable experience here in Kalamazoo, and it was great.
So talk to us a little bit. I'm curious because in those days, Michigan State was a powerhouse in the CCHA. Michigan was starting to get their program going under Red. Were those the two biggest rivalries, obviously because of geographics, or were there other teams that you loved to play against back in those days, Pat?
Boy, I tell you, Michigan had it going in those years. That was the Brian Wiseman, David Oliver, yeah. Denny Felsner. All 6 of their D were in the, ended up playing in the National Hockey League. And then Lake State was the other one. They were rolling. It was Jim Dowd, it was Doug Waite, a couple decent hockey names there, Darren Madeley, Mark Astley, like some guys and they were essentially, for my 3 years at Western Michigan, those 2 programs were 1 and 2 in the country. And so they were the teams we wanted to play all the time. I never forget my Lake State, both my line mates from junior went to Lake State, and Lake State had recruited me as well. And one reason or another wasn't the right fit for me, but we got up to Lake State on our first trip up there, and having said no to them, and I was all fired up, and we come down. It was about my second shift of the game, and a drop pass back to me, and I scored a goal, shot. Actually got a little lucky, hit the post, hit the goalie, went in, and we're celebrating. We're up 1-0, and the next time I looked up at the scoreboard, it was 9-1 Lake State. And, so it was Yeah, it was something else, but I was feeling good about myself for just a moment. But Lake State was a power at the time, and certainly Michigan was as well, and the rest of the CCHA. I think we finished in the top four each of my 3 years, and Ferris State had a good run one of those years, but Michigan State actually during that time was a little bit down the first couple of years, and then my senior year, they had Smolinski and Dwayne Norris, and they had their own batch of Jason Woolley, and they had their own batch of real good players too. So it was quality competition in CCHA for sure.
Yeah, the coach you played for, Fred and I know him, both know him. What are some things that you can say now that you certainly took away from Bill Wilkinson?
Boy, what a quality individual, Bill Wilkinson is. He sets a standard as a person that is not only fun to play for, but just a real lesson in how to live your life and how to treat people. I think Bill is one of the best people you'll ever be around, and is just he lives it every day. He treats his players with respect and allows them to have fun as well playing. So, and our assistant coach at the time, I'm not sure if you guys know, was Mike Schaefer, who's now the longtime head coach of Cornell.
Cornell, yeah.
And, Schaefer is an extremely intense guy, but a great hockey coach in his own right. And I think Schaefer has learned to have a great time and continue to be a great coach out of Cornell with all success.
When I look at the rosters of the Bronco teams you played for, Chris Brooks, yourself, Derek Schooley, Brent Brecky, Scott Garrow, Brian Renfrew, Brian Tulick, Joe Bonnet, Brian Galantine, all coaches. I'm sure you guys have gotten together in Bronco hockey alum outings. Any way to attribute that?
Well, two things. Those who can't coach, so I think there's a bunch of average players in there. But on the other side of it, I think that's a lot of credit to Coach Wilkinson and Coach Schaefer is they made us really love the game. And we tried to find a way to stay in it. And, I was lucky enough that I got to play 8 years pro hockey. But for the other guys, they played a little bit or they didn't, but we all loved the game and wanted to stay in it and try to find our own way to stay in it. And I certainly credit Coach Wilkinson and Coach Schaefer with lots of that.
I can't think of maybe two different personalities, Bill Wilkinson to Frank Anzalone. Frank, wow. Your first pro coach in Roanoke. What was your takeaway there?
Boy, I love Frank, and you're right. Those are our different personalities, but it was actually Frank's last day at Lake State was the day I told him I was going to go to Western. I always say he got fired because he couldn't land me, but I don't think that was the case. But anyway, he was, we've always kept, honestly, to this day in contact. Frank Anzalone is a tremendous, tremendous hockey coach. Again, he lives his life with an intensity that isn't for everyone. But it was for Pat Ferschweiler. And I understood Frank. And I knew that everything he said or did or whatever motivated was from the love of hockey and because his passion was all about hockey. Like the one guy on this team described it perfectly. He said, I don't know if he knows the temperature outside, but he can say everything about every team and every player in the league. And I think that's perfect about Frank Anzalone, especially back in the day. He had a tremendous passion. And so I was successful. Our combination was successful together because we both had a great passion for the game. And if you understood that and you loved the game, you loved playing for Frank Anzalone.
So you spent a couple of years there, Pat, and then you go into the IHL for about a half a dozen years.
Yeah.
What are your best memories of those days, whether it was Minnesota, Kansas City, a short stint in San Francisco for 3 games? What do you take away and still remember today?
Boy, I tell you, what a great league the old IHL was. And for people who don't know, it's one step below the NHL. Most of us were affiliated with the NHL teams. We were with San Jose at the time. And honestly, the friendships I had there and the coaching I got there are probably the best memories of. We could tell inappropriate stories all day long on here, but there was the league was fantastic. And most of the teams were owned by NBA teams. So we were the other half of filling those buildings up. So we got to play in elite cities. And so all around from Utah to Houston to Orlando to Atlanta, to Detroit, all in these NBA buildings. And I tell you, one of the best games I unfortunately didn't get to play in, and I took warm-ups with it, was Gordie Howe's last game. Do you remember he played with the Vipers for the one game?
I was doing PA then.
Yes. So anyway, it was Gordie was going to play in his 6 decades of hockey, I believe, right? And so they dressed a 60-some-year-old Gordie Howe for the game, and they actually so he was their 21st player dressed. I took warm-up, and they thought I was going to be playing in the game. Anyway, they wouldn't allow us to dress 21. I guess I didn't get the Gordie Howe exemption for some reason. But anyway, so I was at the rink, and it was a sold-out 20,000 seat arena at Palace Auburn Hills. Fantastic environment. Gordie Howe is in the starting lineup. You got the Gordie chant. It was a crazy environment, especially for the IHL. And so the play kind of goes down, and we put it in their end. It comes down to our end, the first shift of the game. And here comes Gordie. He's a little behind the play, to say the least. But their guy had won the race, and he wrapped it around the boards of the defenseman. And here comes Gordie coming into the zone at this time. And their defenseman takes a slap shot, bounces off Gordie's butt. One skipper, and I'm telling you, John Casey for us was our goalie, former NHLer, had to make an unbelievable kick save, or Gordie would have scored in that shift. And so then the play turns back up the ice, and Gordie's he's starting to backcheck. He's starting to try to backcheck David Bruce, who we then hit on a breakaway. Offside. That play was 10 feet onside. It wasn't even close. But no, they weren't letting Gordie give up a breakaway, and so they got him off the ice, and he stayed on the bench for the rest of the game, and was, I mean, what a great man. I had lots of opportunities to meet him, but what a great memory just to be. I was in the building. I wish I was on the ice, but in the building for that one was a pretty special moment.
With that said, I just want to quickly follow up. Speaking of Gordie, so who are your hockey heroes growing up in Minnesota when you were a kid?
Boy, I think the most Minnesota guy of all time is probably Neil Broughton. He was a gopher, and he just carried himself well, and ended up being a long-time Minnesota North Star. So, early on in the old National League, I was a Guy Lafleur fan, and we both ended up bald. I'm not sure if that was anything, but anyway, I used to like the way he played hockey. And then as I matured and got a little older, the Marc Messiers of the world, big fan of the way he played. So lots of guys that, Peter Forsberg, big fan of Peter Forsberg, and guys that played super hard and on both ends of the ice, and could score, but also real hard to play against.
Right on.
He also spent a year playing for Marty McSorley's brother Chris in the British League. What was that experience like? What was the level of hockey like there?
The level of hockey, I would say, was probably slightly below the East Coast League back then. It was actually probably the best that league had ever seen right around that time. It was the British Super League at the time. It's changed names several times, I think, since then. And there was a lot of some ex-IHL guys in there. It had turned Chris McSorley had gone over the year before, and he brought a bunch of pretty tough guys over and kind of ran over the league. So by the year I got there, everybody else had filled up on a bunch of tough guys, and it wasn't the European hockey that you guys are thinking of. So, but it was a great experience. I went over there planning on, I was 31 at the time, and 31. And I just wanted to play till I was 35 over in Europe. I was going to go kind of, country to country and just play and get life experience, make a little money. And unfortunately I ripped up my wrist. But what a fun way to, go on paid vacation over in Europe. We got to play in Norway that year. We got to play in Switzerland that year. We got to play in Germany that year. And so a great way to get some different cultures in.
So tell us about the first job you had running the Russell store at the candy company, right?
It is. Yeah.
How the hell did that happen? How did that all work out? How did that transpire for you, Pat?
Well, I tell you, the last 3 years I played pro hockey, I'd summered at Merrill Lynch. because I have a finance degree from Western, and I thought, hey, thought I was going to be a financial advisor. And so they just said, when your career is over, you come and you got a job here. And I worked under two great guys there. And I ripped up my wrist. My career ended. They said, okay, let's go. And right about that time, I got a call from the rink in Kansas City that was just a mile from my house. And they said, hey, we need a hockey director. Heard you got hurt. Would you be interested? And so I went down there to check that out. What I saw was honestly a bunch of practices being run by dads in sneakers and mittens. They couldn't skate. Now there were some quality coaches and stuff in the area too, but what I saw was great opportunity. And so I said to my wife, can you give me 2 years to make this hockey thing work? And then I had to go to the Merrill Lynch guys, and they said, can you give me 2 years? Will the job still be there? And they of course graciously said yes. And so we just started from that spot and said, okay, how can we improve this? And I was lucky. I had a bunch of guys slowly got hurt after me. A guy named Jason Herter, who was, an incredibly successful coach at Minnesota Duluth. A guy named JF Quintain, who played a long time pro, and a bunch of guys got hurt. And I just started inserting them as coaches, and we started upping the level of Kansas City hockey. And the first year I was coach of the single A team, midget, because the double A coach job was already filled, and we did a good job with that. And then the second year they upped me to the double A coach, and we just had two teams at the time, and double A and single A, and they were out of the high school league. And then that second year, the double A team, we had a bunch of very good local kids that were super determined to get better, and they worked real hard. We practiced hard. We did lots of the things that I did as a player. And we finished third in the national tournament with the double A level with these local kids. And as I called around to the North American League, to the USHL to move these kids on, I got the same response over and over, even from my friends, well, first you're coaching double A hockey. You can't. And at that time, I realized, hey, we're going to have to do one of two things. We got to send these kids off, and they have to move to play AAA hockey if they want to move to the next level, or we've got to create AAA hockey here, and I've got to bring this to me. And so I put a 12-page kind of business proposal, if you will, together for the owner of Russell Stover, whose son had played on that double A team, who was graduating out. And so the Ward family, who owned the company at the time, sold it just a couple of years ago. And he came to me and said, okay, let's do this. And it was an amazing thing. I kind of didn't know what I got myself into, and so the first year of our program, we had, I think, 58 kids or 53 kids try out for two teams. And we took 37 to 38 of them. And we kind of did the best we could. And then each year we kind of built. We built, and our friends in double A, in junior hockey started sending us kids. Jason Herter and myself would go to every North American League camp, every USHL camp for kids that couldn't make it there or weren't quite ready or needed something, refinement in their game. And we talked to every kid, and we recruited like we recruit in college now. And we brought kids in from all over they started to be all over the country. We brought in some Europeans, and we just, by the last year at Russell Stover, the sixth year, we had 360 kids try out, and over two different tryouts, and we had actually cut it off at that.
Wow.
So it was, what a great experience though. And what a great age to be able to coach and to affect kids' lives. It was pretty great experience.
The 2-year plans turned into a lifetime, right?
It honestly, I could have stayed there forever. I told my wife when I first started it, and we kind of got going, I said, the only program I'd ever leave for is Western Michigan. And so, near the end of the time there, that's what happened.
Ready?
Walk us through that. How did Blash come calling?
It was funny because I had, I'd met Blash when I was the Marquette midget tournament used to be a big deal back in the day. And honestly, our first 3 years in the pro with Russell Stover, they wouldn't even let us in. And finally, the fourth year we got in there, and We ended up playing a semifinal against Chicago Young Americans. We were 1-2 in the country in the midget program back then, and we ended up winning that game 4-1. And I just met Blash. He was recruiting for Miami of Ohio at the time, and he just said, "Hey, can we have a beer tonight?" And so we sat down, and he started out with, "How the hell are you doing this?" He wanted to know about the program. How is Kansas City beating Chicago and Detroit in all these games, and what's happened? And we just sat down and we talked hockey for hours, and realized we think hockey a lot, along the same lines. We treat our players similarly, and we just had lots of things in common hockey wise. So fast forward to the Western job becoming open. Joe Bonnet was a teammate of mine here at Western, and he was one of the finalists with Jeff. And so Joe had said, "First, get ready. If I get this job, you're coming back to Western with me." So I kind of already prepped my wife. Hey, we got to think about this. And my wife's a super smart lady, and she had a great job in Kansas City, and we could have stayed there for a long time. And she had said, "Let's do this." And so we were at the national tournament in Chicago, had just beat Shattuck in the quarterfinal game to advance to the semifinals. And I get a call from Joe, and he says, we're back at the hotel, and he says, "First, I didn't get the job. Yeah, they gave it to Blashill." He goes, "But you know what? I think he's going to do a great job. He's a real good man. I think he's going to do a great job there." And then so I went upstairs and told my wife. I said, "Well, good news, bad news. Bad news, Joe didn't get the job. Good news is we're not going to have to move." And then literally an hour later, Blashill, I get a call from Blashill, and he says, "Hey, I want to talk to you," because he was still the head coach of Indiana in the USHL at the time, right? And he says, "I want to talk to you about this guy and this guy and this guy," because they had good players. And he said, "But the real reason I'm calling is I want you to come back and be my assistant coach at Western Michigan."
Nice.
So back upstairs I go, and said, "Honey, remember that talk we just had?" And she's great. She's like I said, she's a super smart lady. And she says, "Well, who's this guy? And, why would you want to, should you be working for him?" And so anyway, Blash is, again, he's smart. He brought us both up here to Kalamazoo. He sold more my wife, his vision. And, the rest is kind of history. We came here and we've had a long history together. And great.
How about that first year back? What are the big highlights for you still that you remember about that first season behind the bench?
Boy, just the energy of college hockey and the energy of Lawson Arena is just, it's infectious. It's just, it's a great campus. The college campus is just alive, and especially Western Michigan. I think, I believe is a truly, truly special place. And to kind of go from worst to, making worst, maybe, of the four major, conferences, maybe the worst team in them the year before, to making the NCAA tournament that year, the turnaround, the buy-in of our players, the excitement around, it was all a great year for sure.
Freddie?
Well, when you make that transition to the pros, I know there's a year in Grand Rapids, but did you ever dream of being an NHL assistant coach, an NHL coach with a storied Red Wings franchise that had just come off, one of the greatest runs that we've seen in our lifetime, and now you're behind the bench doing all that, so with Tony Granato and Chris Chelios and peers like that. So walk us through that. How was there a pinch me moment at all, or it's just no? I paid my dues. I'm meant to be here.
Well, it's weird because in essentially 8 years of coaching, I'd gone from coaching AA midget hockey to assistant coach in the National Hockey League. So it's pretty quick, but I never had any intention of coaching, honestly, at any level. It was my passion, and I found a way to make it, bring hockey to me in Kansas City. And then by doing what I think was a pretty good job there, I found my way to Western Michigan. And I think if you have passion and you try to do your job the best you can, opportunities find you. And I think I think people, when they meet me and they know me in the game of hockey, they know I have lots of passion and I love it. And they know that I'm constantly in a search to get better, and not with a goal of moving on and not looking past the job that you have, but focusing on doing the best possible job you can here. And then opportunities, I've been lucky that opportunities presented themselves. So obviously my relationship with Flash, was a big part of that whole thing. But I think if he hadn't recognized the passion that I had or the knowledge I had at midget, I wouldn't have got to Western Michigan. And he wouldn't have felt confident enough to bring me, to the National Hockey League with him. I go back to Frank Anzalone. Frank's again, his passion is amazing, but he taught me something. He went from winning a national championship at Lake Superior State to creating a dynasty at Lake Superior State for a short period of time to, a year or so later, he was coaching high school hockey in New Jersey. And then he came from high school hockey in New Jersey to coaching my East Coast League team. And he said something to me that day that I've taken with me at all times. I said, Coach, how was, you went from here to here to here. And he just said, Pat, I've found out that, wherever you're at, you have to make that your NHL. So when I was in New Jersey high school hockey, that was my NHL. And when I'm here in the East Coast League, that's my NHL. And if you play like that, you coach like that, you live like that, then you're going to be not number one, happy, but number two, successful, and opportunities will present themselves from there. So I've tried to make everywhere I went, playing and coaching, my NHL.
It's interesting to hear you say that, Pat, because I remember sitting down with Andy Murray, you've worked under him 2 different stints for those that don't know. And I remember saying to Andy, you're not at the top level. And he said, but I am at the top level. This is where I am. So it's really cool to hear you say that. And that always stuck with me about Andy. And I've applied that to my life. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great message. I want to ask you a couple more things about the Wings, but since we're talking about Andy, is there any way you guys can possibly do your morning skate on game day any faster than you do now? It's like 18 minutes, right? I love that.
If we make it to 18, that's a long one for sure. We like to get in and get out for sure.
Yes, you do. And
yeah.
It's fun watching it on the bench. He'll always skate by and he'll wink at me. We're done. 18 and a half. But anyways, back to the Wings. Be honest. First time you walked out on the bench, man, Datsuk and Zetterberg are sitting there. What went through your head?
Special. I mean, it's a special opportunity to get a real look at ground level at what world class is, and not just people. I mean, they're extraordinary world class players for sure, but world class people as well. And to see Pav and to have that special opportunity to be on the ice, and I can put it in quotes, Coach Pav. His final year of pro was something special because 2 to 3 times a practice, Pav would make the other NHLers there shake their heads. And that's how special he was. And then, Henrik Zetterberg, what he does on a day-to-day basis and the way he carries himself and the way he executes. And when those guys are your best players in practice every single day. That's what young guys have to grasp, is they're not the best because they're talented. They're the best because they work and they do it every day. The repeatability of their performance, the repeatability of who they are as people, it's great. It's awesome to watch, and we all have to take lessons from it. Like, they are at the top of their game every day. If we picked who was the best player today in practice, Hank, Pav, Nick, Hank, Pav. You have to throw in Cronwall in there as the same type of guy, and that's what has allowed Dylan Larkin, I believe, to now take that next step of leadership, of Anthony Mantha watching those guys for 2 years and getting to go, okay, this is how it's done. And that's why those guys are going to be future great leaders of the Wings, because of what they've got to see on the ice on a daily basis from Pav and from Hank and from Nick.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So I got to ask you. So Andy told me a story years back about Danny DeKaiser, who was also there. How many years were you with Danny? You guys together? 3, 4?
All three. Yep.
All three.
Yeah.
So the whole year, that big year when everyone in Starman thought the Leafs were getting him and all this, and all that's going on. So he told me this story. Edmonton's brass was in town, and he gets a phone call, and I believe it was McTavish, he said, that called him. And he said, Andy, be honest with me. Do we have any chance of getting this kid? He's got a Detroit Red Wings license plate holder on his car as they followed him out. Right? That's true, right? I believe it.
I think, and he grew up in Detroit. And
right, of course.
I think there was, you got to mix it in with opportunity and other things teams are selling. And to get a guy of his caliber of player, obviously there was lots of interest there. But, I think his parents probably had some say in that as well. But you grew up loving the team and you got a chance to play for him. I think it was Detroit first and everyone else second. I credit to Danny is he listened to other teams and he didn't just take meetings with them. He listened. He talked it over with the staff. Hey, these guys are, he had a great opportunity with lots of teams and with some real good players to play with as well. So he took them all seriously. And at the end of the day, I think he went with his heart, and that was with the Red Wings.
Yeah. Freddie.
Well, Pat, here's my question out of left field. Players, when they retire, a lot of them say it's not so much the game they miss the locker room, the camaraderie in the dressing room, that day to day. So thinking of that, two of the funniest men in hockey that I know of, Brent Brecky and Rob Facca. We played with Brent, coached with Rob. Anything jump out, stories with those two guys? I mean, they're just legendary, the way they can make people laugh and feel good.
No doubt. It's Brex is a beauty. I played junior hockey with him and right into college with him too, and was fortunate enough to live with him here at Western Michigan for a couple of years. And I mean, he's the best. He was a little frugal back in the day. I think he was
the cheapskate then, right?
No, I don't want to throw that out there. But it was a good time and a good man for sure. And you mentioned Rob Facca. We call him Fact Daddy. I mean, there is no funnier human being on the face of the earth than him. And a million stories and funny moments with that guy. I just actually talked to him this morning. We're all trying to figure out the hockey world. And who better than to talk it over with Factor, because you're going to laugh and you're going to have a good time while you're doing it. So he doesn't have it figured out either, just so you know.
So you work with the Red Wings with all these world-class players and go back to college hockey to work with Andy, who's got a pro mentality, obviously. What are some of the things that you were able to take back to these young players who aspired to be where you just were?
Well, it's that daily repeatable standard of excellence, I think is one. You just talk about those guys being the best every day. So if you want to reach that level, I think most of our players or lots of the top end guys in college hockey can all play in the National Hockey League, the top guys, on their best day. But how many times can you repeat your best day? And those guys, Pav, Hank, Nick, Larkin, Mantha, are now finding a way to repeat their best days. And that's what the true standard of excellence is how repeatable is your top performance. So your band goes from great to real good. There is no bad. And that's the difference, I think, in the young player to the mature great player is the young player can have a bad game, and the mature great player may have a bad shift and immediately be able to stop that. And so that's a lesson I brought back for sure. And I brought back, I think, more lessons for myself as a coach. When you get to that level and those guys make way more money than the coaches, you take all your time to be hyper organized and never waste a moment of their time. So when you come back, don't meet to meet, right? Don't just have a meeting to meet. If you're going to show video, have it be impactful. Take your time, find the right clips. always have a sense or make it worthwhile every time you meet with a player. You take his time, make it worthwhile, and have him leave with something. But it may take you a little longer to be that organized, but take your time. Make sure that's what I brought back with me as a coach is I know that my meetings are way more concise. My video meetings are teachable, great moments or real correctable clips, and everything's tightened up. And so that's what I brought back as for myself, and I hopefully to our coaching staff is let's make sure we're not ever wasting the players' time. We respect their time. We'll use more of ours to do it if we have to.
And that's got to be invaluable to you because in college, you're limited to the number of hours that you're allowed to work with the players each week.
It's funny. You're limited in your time. I mean, they say there's limits, but in reality, you have lots and lots of time in college, and you can go overboard and overcoach. And so making sure that they're getting necessary, helpful, useful, applicable information. And we want to limit to that. And again, as a staff, we can sit in there for hours and over talk and overthink things. But at the end of the day, when you come out of that coaching room, you want one set of ideas that are coming out with. And so they're easy for the players to understand and easy for them to execute.
And I'm going to add something on FAC. I don't know that I've seen a better dressed assistant coach in the history of the game, man.
Well, he'd tell you the best hair as well, but
yes.
No, 100%. His sense of style, and he says, first you got to wear it like us Italians would. If you believe it, if you wear it like you believe it, and it goes together, then it goes together. Because he can put some things together that we couldn't pull off for sure. We know that.
Yeah,
but he looks great in.
Yeah, he does. I miss Rob. So you guys, I've 3 that I know of. Maybe there's been more, but McGing signed with St. Louis, Wade Allison signed with Philly, and Rushev signed with the Rangers.
We had 6 this year, so
6 in total.
Dawson DiPietro signed with Buffalo.
Okay.
Matthias Samuelson signed with Buffalo as well. And Cam Lee, a defenseman, signed with Pittsburgh. So we have 6 cap deals off our roster this season. Pretty great year for the Broncos.
Yeah, and that's like we talked at the outset of this thing. Like there would have been zero surprise for me if you guys were able to win it, the tournament this year, and have a great postseason all the way around. Just some thoughts on those guys. I mean, I'll start with McGing. Got to know him a little bit. Don't do a ton of your games, but I just love his mentality, his attitude. What do you think he does well that will adapt one day at the pro level, Pat?
Well, he competes. He's 5'8", 5'9". He's probably 170 pounds, but when he looks in the mirror, he sees 6'4", 220. Like, right. This guy is he's a competitor. And so his compete level, obviously, he has skill and ability and hockey sense and those things. You couldn't be a first-team All-American without those. But I think what separates Hugh McGing is his day-to-day compete is will. He just simply gets out there and wants things and wants pucks more than the guy next to him, and he wins battles. And so that, to me, translates to the National Hockey League, because if you're not a first-line player, second-line player, where's your role? How do you fit in? How do you win a spot? Like, he's going to find his way. I believe he's going to find his way in a National Hockey League roster through his will and through his compete.
Allison had a ton of injuries, but the guy dealt with adversity. He persevered. To me, he just had a will about him. You coached him. What are your thoughts on him?
Boy, I really, really, I gave those guys their scholarships back in the day. FAC and I had recruited those. That's how long the recruiting cycle is now. I'd been gone for 5 years. I came back, and they're still seniors. So, great kid. Wade is a big time competitor, and what he's added into his game from when we first recruited him, he was a pure offensive talent, and that still is there. But Wade's added a B game. He's added a B game. He tracks pucks. He works. He was willing to block shots. He was willing to play the body. All those things, again, that are going to, how do I find my way into the National Hockey League and get a coach's trust to put me out there again? He's developed that in a huge way. His character has been tested through the injuries for sure. And, I think it, honestly, and he would say it too, it took him a while to figure out how to deal with those. It's not an easy thing for a kid who's been a superstar to then not be as good at hockey right away when you come back. And so he figured out a way now. What does Wade Allison's new look of success look like? And it took a little while for him to figure it out, but mentally he's in a great spot now. Physically he's in a great spot, and I would expect him to compete for a National Hockey League roster spot.
Good stuff. Freddie?
Well, Pat, this pandemic time might be a good reset time for a lot of things, including youth sports. I don't think we can put the genie back in the bottle, but do you have some recommendations about what youth hockey can do? Because you grew up in that Minnesota-based community hockey, which I've become familiar with in the last few years, and really see the benefits of that here in Detroit, where you're chasing coaches and chasing organizations and changing seemingly yearly, which I'm not sure does a lot for a young man's character, even though the parents can be meddlesome in that regard. But do you have 2 or 3 concrete suggestions for youth hockey that you could pass along to us?
Well, youth hockey, and I'm the vice president of Koha Youth Hockey here, so I'm still involved in youth hockey. And because I love youth sports, and both my daughters played youth sports, and I think they're invaluable to kids' growth. Number one, parents, manage your expectations. Start with the fact that your son or daughter is not probably going to play in the National Hockey League or the top league wherever they're at. What do you want to get out of the sport? I wanted my daughters, and I was happy. Are they off the couch? Are they excited about being a part of a team? Are they having fun? Are they exercising? Let's manage our expectations off the start. And let's follow their passion. Don't lead it. So when they ask for more, give them more. If they don't ask for more, don't pile it on in force. Follow your kids' passion, and it'll take you. And calm down. Calm down. Don't compare your son or daughter to someone else's son or daughter. Hugh McGing is a perfect example. When we gave him his college scholarship, he was about 5'4", maybe 125 pounds. His line mate at the time was 6'2", 200. Everybody matures at a different time physically, mentally, wherever it comes. Your timeline, your son's timeline, your daughter's timeline is different than the next person. So stop comparing them. Is he enjoying? Is he loving what he's doing? Is he having fun? Does he want more of it? That's what it should be. Not because you've spent a lot of money and invested some of your time. Does that make your child love the game more? And that's not the way it works. It works from them back to us, not us to them. That would be my youth sports.
And we should
soapbox.
We should mention that Koha, among the Michigan amateur hockey organizations, is one of the ones that probably does it better than any other. And you'll be glad to know, Pat, I think something I read today was when the rinks and youth hockey start back up, they're recommending maybe parents have to just sit in the car and wait for their kid to be done. Wouldn't that be great?
For some, it would be.
Yeah, for some, it's interesting because I love watching my daughter, in soccer practice, let's say, and not because I want to analyze practice, but because I want to watch her enjoy it, and I want to watch her get better. It's fun for me, and that's if it's looked at in that way, it is great. I know that in Kansas City, and I've always run my own hockey schools every summer since I was 17 years old, and I was running a spring session, and we just called it skating and skills. So on Mondays you skated, and on Wednesdays we did all skills, right? And so we're there on Monday, and probably this 8-year-old kid, and we have 30 kids in the ice. We're going down and back and forth, and we're just doing some edge work. And every time he get to the end, he's looking up in the stands, and here's his dad. He's giving instructions. He's yelling at him. We get on the other end, and he's doing the same thing. And I said, I had to, because now he's distracting other kids, right? In line, they're looking at the dad. And so I had to go talk to him. I said, is that your dad up there? And he says, yeah, that's my dad. I said, is he gives you a lot of help out here? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, how about this? For the rest of the session, we're going to just I'm going to have you not look at your dad, but only look at the coaches who are talking. And then afterwards, we'll meet with your dad. How about that? He said, well, that's great. Let's do that. And so we go through the rest of the time. He ignores his dad. And I can see his dad getting frustrated as he goes from end to end or station to station, because now the kid's not paying attention to him and he almost can't contain himself. So then we called the dad in at the end and we said, Mr. Johnson, let's call him. And, he's like, what did you say to my son? I saw he wasn't. And I said, well, okay. Did you play professional hockey? And he said, no. I said, did you ever play hockey? He said, no. I said, have you coached for 30 years? And he said, no. And I said, well, lucky for you, I have. I've done all those things. And so why don't you let the hockey teaching, coaching, instruction, I'll handle that part, and you handle getting to the rink and enjoying getting better. And we'll have and I'm telling you, after the 6-week program, he pulled me aside and he said, thank you. I wish I had that talk 3 years earlier. Thank you. And he goes, now I can sit back and I can enjoy watching my son instead of trying to help. He thought he was helping out. It was not even his fault. He just wanted to be part of it, but his part was picking the right coaches and signing his son up and then getting out of the way. That's the right thing to do, is getting out of the way sometimes. Allow the people that you've hired or that you trust to instruct your son, just like you do when you send him off to school.
If that happens again, you can show him I remember it was a parody of a commercial for the XT300 helmet. The player could have communication with his parent in the stands. You ever see that?
Oh, I did. Beautiful. Absolutely nice. Beautiful.
Well, Pat, really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to do this with us, and always enjoy seeing you guys in Kalamazoo, as I live about an hour and a half from here, so it's always a fun trip. And the one game we had there this year, you guys put on a hell of a show. You beat Duluth that night, so it was a great win for your team that night on a Friday night. So thanks for doing this, my friend.
Absolutely, fellas. I really enjoyed it. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves.
You too, Pat. That's Pat Ferschweiler, Associate Head Coach of Western Michigan Hockey. For Fred Pletch, Ben Holden, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time with an all-new edition of No Holding Back.